So in this video, I'm going to be talking about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and specifically the section of the book dealing with the creature or the monster's request for a female companion. And this is volume 2, chapter 10, and then the beginning of volume 3, chapters 1 through 3, where the action revolves around Victor's conflict of whether or not to build or create the female being, a companion for his original creature. So that's what we'll be talking about in this lecture. So in volume 2, chapter 9, Victor finally responds to the creature's story, and the creature has now asked him at the very end of chapter 8 for Victor to follow through with his responsibilities to him, his sense of duty as a parent, as the creator. He says, "We may not part until you have promised to comply with my requisition. I am alone and miserable. Man will not associate with me, but one as deformed and horrible as myself would not deny herself to me. My companion must be of the same species and have the same defects. This being you must create." So the monster has asked Victor to create a female companion of the same appearance or same species. That's how he refers to himself. And he's saying, you must do this for me, because it's his only opportunity or only chance in life to be happy, to have a companion. And it's the only thing that will allow him to become fulfilled and benevolent again. So Victor's response is chapter 9, where, he's very conflicted. He's both angry and sympathetic to the monster that he created. So he's, visibly repulsed by the creature. And he, hates the fact that this creature has murdered his loved ones, William. So there's this push and pull within him. He also feels sort of a sense of duty and a sense of sympathy for the creature, because he was the one who created it. So he has this sense of responsibility to at least, create an environment where the creature will no longer harm other humans. So it is this sort of push and pull between creator and creature, and how they are, how Victor is conflicted about his decision. And eventually the monster says, if you consent, neither you nor any other human being shall ever see us again. I will go to the vast wilds of South America, and with his female companion, they'll sort of disappear into the dark, parts of the jungle and never set foot on, human society again. So he makes these promises to sort of basically exile himself, disappear, and will only be a kind person from here on out. But Victor, again, he's contemplating, the possibilities of what will happen if there is a female creature. So he's, again, going back and forth in his mind about different arguments for and against the creation of this creature. He says, the possibility is there that you will return and again try to seek kindness by human society, and you'll be met with detestation. Your evil passions will be renewed, and you will then have a companion to aid you in the task of destruction. So he's saying, why would I make another second monster? I have one problem already, one monster. Why would I create a second one and double my trouble, basically? So he's, again, going back and forth. Mixed, horror and hatred with compassion, and a sense of duty. So this is the conundrum that Victor is placed in. It's kind of a you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't kind of situation, where if he complies with the monster, he's also creating a female monster that that is unpredictable, and he doesn't know how it will behave or if it will become more of a problem than his first creature. So there's this element of the unknown with this female creature that is troubling to Victor. Page 172, he finally does consent. He says, I consent to your demand on your solemn oath to quit Europe forever and every other place in the neighborhood of man, as soon as I shall deliver into your hands a female who will accompany you in your exile. And the monster swears that they will do so. So that's sort of the culmination of their confrontation between creature and creator. Victor has consented to build this female version, female being of the same proportions and methods that he used to create the first monster. So he's going to again visit the graves, dig up bodies, piece them together, and build a female being. And he's hoping that this will solve his problem. But in the back of his mind, he's also aware that this might just be the beginning of his problems once these two creatures get together. So in volume 3, we have discussion of Victor's, again, his mindset as he contemplates both his promise to create the female creature and then the possibilities of what might happen if he does follow through on that promise. So volume 3 opens up with Victor making actually 2 promises, and they're sort of parallel promises. On one side, he's promised the creature, the monster, that he is going to build a female companion for it, and he hopes that this will again solve the problem of this monster seeking revenge and killing all his loved ones. And then at the same time, he also promises his father that he's going to marry Elizabeth soon. So his father, he says, I confess, my son, that I have always looked forward to your marriage with your cousin as the tie of our domestic comfort and the stay of my declining years. So he's basically telling his son, Victor, I thought you would, always marry Elizabeth, move back home, and then they'd all be a happy family. In his old age, he would have his son there and Elizabeth, and they would help take care of him. And he acknowledges that, there might be some problems or obstacles in their courtship, that Elizabeth maybe is too close to their family and he regards her as a sister, not as a wife, or Elizabeth questions whether he maybe, wants to sow his wild oats more and go off to Europe and experience life more before he gets married. But Victor he expresses the sense that he loves Elizabeth, that he wants to marry her, and that it's always been his future hope or prospect that they are bound together as husband and wife. So he does make this promise to his father and to Elizabeth that once all of his business that he can't really talk about as in the creature, once that's settled, he will be ready to enter into marriage with Elizabeth. So he didn't want to, he says, he says, alas, to me, the idea of an immediate union with my cousin was one of horror and dismay. I was bound by a solemn promise which I had not yet fulfilled and dared not break? Or if I did, what manifold miseries might not impend over me and my devoted family? Could I enter into a festival with this deadly weight yet hanging around my neck and bowing me to the ground? I must perform my engagement and let the monster depart with his mate before I allowed myself to enjoy the delight of a union from which I expected peace. So first he has to fulfill his promise to the creature and create that female companion before he allows himself any sense of happiness or joy by marrying Elizabeth. So they negotiate that, after 2 years of time, while he visits around Europe with the companionship of Clerval, Henry, his old friend, that after 2 years of time, he would return and he would marry Elizabeth. And during that 2 years of time, he would again fulfill his promise to the creature. Elizabeth, it's acknowledged that she approved of Victor's departure, that she wanted to marry him, but she acknowledges that, he should go off and experience life while he can before settling down. And it's also acknowledged this inequality, societal inequality between men and women. On page 179, Elizabeth approved of the reasons of my departure and only regretted that she had not the same opportunities of enlarging her experience and cultivating her understanding. She acknowledges that, women at this time in history did not have those opportunities to go and, explore the world on their own, to, gain a higher education, to be independent, to be free. They were sort of stuck in the domestic sphere, and, she's expected to get married, and that's her life sort of laid out for her as a woman, to be married and to have children. So it's just Mary Shelley acknowledging the gender inequality that exists at this time. Frankenstein as a man has all the freedom in the world to, be a young man, to be free, and to travel and get an education. Elizabeth is the opposite. She's stuck at home, limited in her options, and it's very unfair, the gender division here. So chapter 2 of volume 3 sees Victor and Clerval, Henry, off on their journey, which will again span 2 years' time. And in that time, Victor will also isolate himself once again and go through that whole process of creating the female companion as he did with his first creature. He's going to fulfill his promise to build this female companion. His relationship with Henry, again, he sees Henry as almost like a part of his former self, he says on page 183. So in Clerval, I saw the image of my former self. He was inquisitive and anxious to gain experience and instruction. So Victor is sort of a shell of his former self. He's kind of been broken and in the process of creating his monster and suffering the guilt that hangs over him. Henry is like his former self. He's, ambitious and inquisitive, anxious to get experience. He's a young man and he has the whole world in front of him. He takes joy in experiencing new things and meeting new people. And then Victor is sort of the opposite, right? He is now struggling in himself, tormented by his actions of his past. And he says he hates himself, basically. On page 185, he says, I am a blasted tree. The bolt has entered my soul. And I felt then that I should survive to exhibit what I shall soon cease to be, a miserable spectacle of wrecked humanity, pitiable to others and abhorrent to myself. So a blasted tree that's been hit by a bolt of lightning basically is the image that he uses to describe himself. So he's been forever changed by his actions of creating this monster, and he's lost his innocence, and he hates the man that he's become. He feels guilty. He says, I felt as if I had committed some great crime, the consciousness of which haunted me. I was guiltless, but I had indeed drawn down a horrible curse upon my head, as mortal as that of a crime. So he still sees himself as somewhat guiltless, but he says, I brought down this curse upon himself. And he feels like the only way that he can free himself of this curse is by fulfilling the promise that he made to the creature. So he finds himself the most sort of isolated area that he can find and separates from Henry. And this is the Orkney Islands in the Scottish Highlands, where it's very uninhabitable. He says the soil was barren. So it's a very sort of gothic, remote environment. And this is where he's going to build this female creature, where he's isolating himself in this dark, gloomy, kind of scary, desolate environment. So volume 3, chapter 3 is the turning point. And it is a reversal of Victor's initial promise to the creature. So this is while he's at his laboratory. He's in the process, so he's, working on the female being, going through that process again. And he has this almost like an epiphany and completely reverses his promise and breaks that promise to the creature. So his epiphany, this moment of awakening, is chapter 3, where he contemplates and ultimately decides that building a female companion for his creature is a mistake, and he stops this process by ripping her body apart. So he had composed parts of her together, and then he rips her apart. And this starts the cycle of revenge and death that it started with William and Justine, but we see it continue, the vengeful, violent streak of the creature in attacking Victor and his loved ones. But the question is, why does Victor ultimately decide against building a female companion? And there's lots of different arguments. So one of the things we might do is to look at sort of the pros and cons, the conflict, the internal conflict that Victor has while he's contemplating whether or not to go through with this promise that he made. Ultimately, we know that he decides he will not build this female creature. So it's important for you to understand sort of how he came up with that final decision. So we can take a look at some examples, both for and against the creation of a female companion for the monster, and try to pick out the strongest arguments for or against. So on page 190, again in chapter 3, volume 3, he goes through some different arguments about why he shouldn't build the female creature. So one reason is that she might be more evil than the first creature. So there's no guarantee that he says, her disposition might be even worse. She might become 10,000 times more malignant than her mate and delight for its own sake in murder and wretchedness. So he's worried that she's going to be, even more murderous or more violent than his original creature. And the other argument, so they might, there's no guarantee that they'll follow their side of the promise, so they might not exile themselves. So there's no guarantee that they will leave human society. So he says his original creature had swore to quit the neighborhood of man and hide himself in deserts, but she had not. And she, who in all probability was to become a thinking and reasoning animal, might refuse to comply with a compact made before her creation. So as a female being, she is her own person. So she might make up her own mind as a thinking and reasoning animal and not agree to their original decision. So her capability as an independent thinker might bite him in the butt, so to speak, right? So it might cause more problems for Victor. He also says they might hate each other. So there's no guarantee that the two creatures will be good companions with one another. He says they might even hate each other. The creature who already loathed his own deformity, and might he not conceive a greater abhorrence for it when it came before his eyes in the female form. So the original creature, might not find the female creature being attractive, or vice versa. He says she might also turn with disgust from him to the superior beauty of man. She might quit him and he be again alone, exasperated by the fresh provocation of being deserted by one of his own species. So they might hate each other, and she might be attracted to a human male. So that might cause all sorts of other problems if she wanted to be part of human society. And then the next argument he has against creating the female being is that if they do get along, one of the first things that they're also going to want is children. And this is going to create a new species of being. And he refers to this as a race of devils would be propagated upon the earth, who might make the very existence of the species of man a condition precarious and full of terror. So he's saying, what have I done, or what the possibility of these two creatures procreating and creating new life, and this being a new species, and then having that species also put all of mankind or humankind in jeopardy. So this is a kind of revelation to Victor. He says, "For the first time, the wickedness of my promise burst upon me. I shuddered to think that future ages might curse me as their pest, whose selfishness had not hesitated to buy its own peace at the price, perhaps, of the existence of the whole human race." So he acknowledges that, he might save himself some grief by creating the female companion and having, consented to the demands of his original creature. But he's saying that it comes at a cost, that he's possibly putting all of humanity at risk by potentially creating a new species of being. So there is this sense of irony in Victor's situation. You know, if you think back to who he was as a young man and his original intentions of building his first creature, he wanted to do something noble and beautiful for humanity. He wanted to alleviate illness and sickness and help benefit humankind by putting an end to death and disease and helping people as a society. But ironically, his work has ended up threatening humanity with extinction. So it's kind of, his good intentions have been so skewed in the opposite direction. And it's the irony that he faces in this moment, that he's on the brink of making an error by creating the female companion, and he decides in this moment to rip the female being into pieces and destroy his creation. So he sees, or he's witnessed this act of destruction of the creature. The female creature is witnessed by his original creature. And it's the moment that revenge is in place. So Victor describes, so Frankenstein, or Victor looks at the creature who's looking upon him, and he says, "As I looked on him, his countenance expressed the utmost extent of malice and treachery. I thought with a sensation of madness on my promise of creating another like him, and trembling with passion tore to pieces the thing on which I was engaged. The wretch saw me destroy the creature on whose future existence he depended for happiness, and with a howl of devilish despair and revenge, withdrew." So basically he has broken his promise, and now the monster is out to get him. And he'll threaten him. He says, "I will be with you on your wedding night." And this is the threat that he makes to forever cause Victor unhappiness and to always seek revenge against him. But Victor says, you know, for the first time in, you know, since the original creation, he sees clearly that he can't continue, you know, consenting to this monster's requests. He is doing the right thing by destroying his female creature, and he sees that as being a selfish thing if he did go through with it. So it would save himself, but he says it would doom the rest of humankind. So he wants to do something now that's not selfish. He wants to be selfless and do something good for humanity. So he wants to destroy his original creature and restore a sense of the natural order in the world. But he's basically let loose this monster now that is very angry at him and is going to take a toll on his life and happiness as long as he's alive. So in your own thoughts, you can also contemplate what you would do in Victor's situation and why you think possibilities, why you think the monster has a valuable position in creating the female companion. So what are his arguments for creation, and what would you do in Victor's situation? Would you follow through on your promise and build the female companion, or would you agree with his final decision to break that promise and destroy the female being? So something to contemplate as you read through the ending of the book.